It was just kind of like, that had the light bulb over my head. Like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to write a book about Kurt Cobain. It's going to be for suicide awareness and prevention. It's going to focus on mental health. And it's going to combine, the things that I like to do. I mean, his real story, like what he was to people, this kind of, far-reaching effect he's had on people, all the ways he championed the marginalized, that side of his story. And in my research, I've found that unless people are really fans of the band, that's really all that most people know. That's what he's associated with. And once I started doing my research and learned about this really compassionate, empathetic human being that Kurt Cobain was, it not only intrigued me and made me want to write this book, but it kind of angered me to think that you have this human being who had this beautiful life, and yes, he struggled, but he is completely defined by a final act of desperation, if you will. And how sad that just negates 27 other incredible years. I think a lot that gets left out of the news feed, these lesser known things about him. And having experienced a family suicide in 2017, I lost a family member, Walter, to suicide. No, not in a bad way. I know people, I get that look, yeah. It's not like if Nirvana came on the radio, I would turn the station. It's not like that. My expectations, and I know I said this before, but my expectation for the book and what would make me happy is one person who's really going through it, one person who's really struggling, reads the book, finds the resources at the end, makes a call that saves a life. And it won't bring Walter back, it won't bring Kurt back, but it saves somebody else's family member. And then my book is more successful than any New York Times best-selling book out there. That's how I feel.
Hi, Kelly. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for accepting the invite.
No, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
I think that it's important to say at the beginning that we have again a special episode today. After the one with Greg from the IDKs, now we have an episode with Kelly. Kelly is not an expert, but Kelly has a nice story which I would love to share. She's, like I copied from your website, she's a writer and a mediocre guitarist. So, Kelly, I would like to read first, before we go into a bit of detail, I would like to read about what I did today, what I usually do before my episodes. I ask ChatGPT what it knows about you. And it says like this: Kelly Catlin, sorry.
Catlin, that's okay.
Is
I
a
get
passion.
Catlin all the time, trust me.
Perfect. So, is a passionate writer and music historian dedicated to exploring the lives and legacies of influential artists. With a keen eye for detail, and a deep appreciation for music's power to shape culture. Catlin's work offers fresh perspective on the stories behind legendary musicians. Through her research and writing, she seeks to provide readers with a deeper understanding of the people behind the music that moves us.
That's what I hope to do. That's what I hope this book does.
Perfect. So now to go into the book story first, or to mention the book first. Kelly will launch on the 25th of February, and please correct me if I'm wrong, 20 or 25th? 20th, sorry. I'm sorry. Okay. 20th of February, we'll launch a book which is called Kurt Cobain, Forever in Bloom. Mm-hmm. The book will be coming out on the Genius book Publishing. Mm-hmm. The book is telling the story of Kurt from a different perspective, as we have discussed before, but before we go into the detail of the book, I would like to get to know you and maybe tell us a bit the story, how you get to write the book. So first and foremost, I would like to know, where are you originally from?
New Jersey in the United States.
That's
born and raised and seldom get to leave. So
I think I know you got my envy because I love New York generally and all the surrounding areas. Were you always in love with storytelling?
Yes and no. I've always loved writing. So I'm 41, I'll be 42 this summer, and I started writing when I was 15 years old, but it was a different kind of journaling. I mostly like to express myself through song lyrics. And that just kind of, I think, started my love of music when I was 16. I got my first guitar. And that was kind of when all, this kind of started coming together. Okay, I like writing, I like music, how can I put these things together? In my 20s, I was in a bunch of different bands, and I sang in these bands and I did the lyrics for the bands. So it was still kind of getting out that creative storytelling, but, through lyrics. Um, then, as like my late 30s, I kind of started with short stories, but mostly just writing for these online publications, reviewing bands for Mixdown. I write home and garden, articles, all kinds of different stuff. I'm on a variety of different online publications that I write for. Um, but the book was something that I never, not, I don't want to say I didn't want to do. I don't mean that in a bad way. I just never thought I would write a book. It wasn't, not that it didn't interest me, it just didn't occur to me that it might be a thing that I did one day. But I was very, I think, moved learning about Kurt Cobain's story, and not the story that, when something comes up in your Google news feed, you scroll and you read it and it's, oh, he was a tortured artist and all that. I mean, his real story, like what he was to people, this kind of, far-reaching effect he's had on people, all the ways he championed the marginalized, that side of his story. I think a lot that gets left out of, of the news feed, these lesser known things about him. And having experienced a family suicide in 2017, I lost a family member, Walter, to suicide. Um, and he's in the book, he's mentioned in the book. It was just kind of like, that had the light bulb over my head, like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to write a book about Kurt Cobain. It's going to be for suicide awareness and prevention. It's going to focus on mental health, and it's going to combine, the things that I like to do. Like, I like to, I'm a creative writer.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you write a nonfiction, story about somebody, but, so the entire book is interviews with the exception of four chapters, and four chapters, and it all comes together and it works, but four chapters I write about different concerts. But the goal with those chapters was to have these elements of creative narrative nonfiction where I could take readers and hopefully have them read this chapter and be like, I feel like I was at that show, like down to what the air felt like, to the colors, and then to tie those seemingly random chapters into the book, I interviewed people who were at those concerts. And that was how I was able to write this book that, really details these things about Kurt Cobain, but still take that creative writing that I enjoy and mesh it into it. So,
Were you a fan of his music?
no, not in a bad way. I know people like, I get that look. Yeah. It's not like if Nirvana came on the radio, I would like turn the station. It's not like that. I was familiar with a couple of their, more popular songs. Obviously, "Smells Like Teen Spirit," "Come As You Are." Had a very good friend growing up who loved them. So obviously, I knew about the band, but it just wasn't music that I really went out of my way to listen to. I guess I
Mm-hmm.
was kind of ambivalent, not a fan. I knew very little about the band. If someone had come up to me on the street and was like, "Are you familiar with Kurt Cobain?" I would have said, "Oh yeah, he was lead singer of Nirvana. He had, a drug problem, and then he took his own life." Like, I knew that much, and that was
Mm-hmm.
it. And in my research, I've found that unless people are really fans of the band, that's really all that most people know.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he's associated with. And once I started doing my research and learned about this really compassionate, empathetic human being that Kurt Cobain was, it not only intrigued me and made me want to write this book, but it kind of angered me to think that you have this human being who had this beautiful life, and yes, he struggled, but he is completely defined by a final act of desperation, if you will. And how sad that that just negates 27 other incredible years. And that made me think of Walter and, how we lost him to suicide, and that my family remembers him for the kind, compassionate, funny person he was.
Mm-hmm.
We don't, reduce his life to his final moments. And to me, having so many impressionable young people look up to Kurt Cobain, I just feel like it's a public disservice to just keep approaching him from the same kind of same kind of tired, worn out narrative
Hmm.
because he was more than his depression. He was more than his, substance abuse. And my book looks to rectify that. For anybody who wants to learn about a different side of him, I have 500 pages of a different side of Kurt Cobain.
What? So, as far as I understood, you are not aware. You're not even aware of his story before you start digging into it. You knew the headlines that everyone knew, basically, because let's be honest, that's the biggest problem actually that we have, because everyone is listening, is reading to headlines and not to the story and to the details behind it.
Yep.
What was the frequency of the facts? Did you find out about his story after you had that case in your family, or were you aware of the family a bit of the case a bit before?
No, so Walter died in 2017, and I started working on this book 2 years ago. So I started working
Okay.
on it, and yeah, well, oh, geez, over 2 years now. So definitely, it's probably about, I want to say late 2022. Yeah, that's when I started working on the book, late 2022. Um, and it was, I think about Walter all the time, and I wanted to understand more about suicide awareness and prevention and mental health and what can we do. So it's always been something I've taken an interest in, but never in a million years did I think that I would somehow connect that to Kurt Cobain
Hmm.
because it just wasn't where my brain was at. It was during the pandemic. I came home. My neighbor was outside. He was blasting Nirvana, and my neighbor's young. I've probably got about 20 years on him. And I went outside, and this is music from my youth. And I said to him, "You guys still listen to this? Like, what a duh question! Like, obviously." So now kind of like Nirvana's in the back of my mind. So I go inside and I'm doing my thing. And later on that day, I say, "Alexa, play Smells Like Teen Spirit." So Alexa plays Smells Like Teen Spirit. And now all of a sudden, I'm 13 years old again at a high school dance, and they've got boys on the left and girls on the right. But Smells Like Teen Spirit comes out, and all of a sudden we're one. Um, so that tripped, I think anyway. I mean, I think it tripped the Google algorithm where now Kurt Cobain is coming up in my news feed.
Hmm.
And once you click on something, then all of a sudden, like, that you're going to get bombarded with Kurt Cobain stuff morning, noon, and night. And it was one of the headlines that I read that really affected me. And it was at one point, another one of Kurt's guitars was for sale. And it said, a broken guitar of a broken musician. And it bothered me. And here's a man I didn't know anything about, and it bothered me. And I was like, this just can't be the way we remember people. So, long story short, another night I'm on HBO. I can't sleep. It's middle of the night, and I see a Kurt Cobain montage of Heck, the rock doc, pop up. Like, when did you want to watch this? And I'm like, yeah, all right, why not? And I don't usually watch rock documentaries because unless it's a band I really, really closely follow, I feel like there's going to be information about, a person, an artist, whatever, that I probably, oh, you had to be there to have it make sense. And I'm like, oh, I won't be able to follow this movie. It's going to have all these, Easter eggs about Nirvana that I won't understand. It's totally user friendly. For anybody who just wants an awesome movie, highly recommend watching it. And I'm watching this movie about Kurt Cobain, and it starts out, you can feel the excitement, you know what I mean, of watching him as a little boy grow and as he's turning into this worldwide sensation. And it's this palpable excitement watching this movie. And then obviously it starts to, take a turn for the worse because they show scenes of his drug use, and then eventually, we all know how the movie ends. And I was so affected by the movie because it has so much artistry in it. First off, there's all these there's animation in it, and it's an animation of Kurt Cobain, and he's the narrator. This guy narrating it, so I'm googling it, and it's apparently these montage of Heck home recordings that he had done, I think from 1987 to 1994, and Brett Morgan, who did the film, directed the film, got a hold of these tapes from Courtney Love, and found this footage, this audio footage of Kurt Cobain narrating, reading these stories from his journals, and to come in and have an animator like create everything, it was just like you don't know where to look first in the movie. It was really awesome. Then you have the music, which is out of control. And it's done by this incredible composer. His name is Jeff Dana. He's done the music for some wild movies, TV shows, you name it. And what he did was he took some of Nirvana's songs and he redid them. He completely reimagined them. and some are childlike, and some he's literally got people just banging on empty suitcases to make noise. Like they're incredible, these songs. And at the end of the movie, I'm crying because it's a sad ending, and it was just one more kind of like spike in my fascination where I was like, I need to learn more about this man. And that led me to reach out to Jeff, who did the music for the movie. And I was like, I'm going to write something about him. Do you want to be part of it? Jeff was like, yeah, absolutely. He's in the book. Um, and then it was me, talking to a lot of the indie artists that I will like ask about their music before I go write about it for Mixdown. And I was noticing this theme from people, like what, turned you on to becoming a musician? And I was hearing a lot that it was Kurt Cobain and his message. And all these things kind of started to take shape. And I was like, yeah, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to write a book and it's going to be a celebration of this man and his life. And I'm going to bring in, a bunch of new people and I'm going to ask questions that maybe people haven't asked before. And we're going to find a different side of this man. And that was it. And, over 2 years and 500 pages later, we have a book.
How was the initial vision for the book? You said you wanted to make it a celebration of life, right? At the
Yeah.
end, I would sum it up as a celebration of life. Did you change something on the way, or was it stayed the same?
Totally different book. So when I first started doing this, I was kind of kicking around different titles and I didn't know what to call it and all these things. And the way the book was originally going to be was it was going to be not super long, maybe 50,000 words, maybe 80,000 words. And it was just going to be Kurt's impact on indie artists today. So I
Hmm.
was going to bring in like a couple indie artists. We were going to talk. They were going to tell me about their career. They were going to tell me about how Kurt turned them on to music. It was going to be a total indie project. And that was it. I'd write about the couple concerts just to kind of texturize it, bring my creative elements in, have one chapter that's like a bit of a background on Kurt so people could kind of understand more about him, and then call it a day. It's not that. It's that, but like amplified. So it was that book, but like really amplified. So what happened was, but one thing I will say has always been the same. I always set out in my mind this book was going to be something that somehow gave back. So from day one, I knew I was going to donate at least half my profits to charity. Like that was never, that's been a constant. That was the whole impetus for the book was if we're going to do this, if I'm going to be another person to tackle writing about, a rock icon, um, it can't be because I'm trying to grab headlines or I want attention. All the things that irritated me that made me want to write this book. And I was like, and I've got to put my money where my mouth is and show people that this book was written for the right reasons. Let's find some worthwhile causes and let's get money to them from the book. So that's been, my promise from the beginning. And I've been making good on that actually. Since the book isn't out yet, it's available for pre-sale, but it's not physically out. I wanted to do something to use it to make money for charities. So last summer, I hosted a virtual writing workshop and lasted about 10 weeks, had a nice little group of writers, and we gave 100% of the profits to one of the charities to kind of like, yeah, we're making good. And it was neat because I got like a thank you in the mail from the charity. And it was like, oh, thank you so much for the donation on behalf of, Kurt Cobain, Forever in Bloom. So that was cool. But that charity is actually in Cobain's hometown of Aberdeen, and it's called Camp Victory, and they provide free summer camp to children who are sexual abuse survivors. So we were able to raise enough to cover the amount that it would cost to send one kid to camp that summer. So, which I know some people might be like, "Oh, that's it," and I'm like, "Yeah, that's awesome. One kid got to go to camp. Like that's it's awesome for that kid, you know."
Every kid that you get extra sent to camp, it's a success. It doesn't matter if it's one or two or three. It doesn't matter.
That's how I feel. The whole point was just to put things like, moving things in the right direction. But the book changed. And what wound up happening was a book that was supposed to just be indie artists. The indie artists now have their own section in the book, which now is 5 sections long. Some people have told this story 1,000 times and didn't want to tell it again, and that's fine. No, nothing but love and respect for the people in the book and the people who aren't in the book. I think people tend to forget that he was a real person and he did die by suicide. And it might be hard for people to want to speak about this ad nauseum. and maybe not want this dredged up again to be in yet another book. So I was very like, here's what I'm doing. If you want to be in it, let me know. So,
I think people want to make sure that it's not a money printing machine again, because I think there are a lot of money printing machines written only because they had the cut names on it. It was successful guaranteed, and then they say, okay, I don't want to be part of this anymore. And
yeah.
what would you say was the challenging part, Kelly? Was it the finding of people to being interviewed, or telling them the Walter story every time?
Finding them wasn't, finding email addresses can be tough. Oh my God, especially because I don't like social media and
Makes
everybody's
two
like,
of us.
yes, I really try to stay away from it. And I mean, obviously, I have different social media platforms because like you have to, but I don't I don't like do much with them. Um, so everybody and their brother is on Instagram, and I like just got on Instagram 2 weeks ago, but I'm private on it. So I was like, how do I contact these people on Instagram? Like, I just wound up putting out like the bat signal, and I was like, if you want to be in it, reach, just let me know. But the challenging part was talking about suicide nonstop because sure, it's a celebratory book, but we all know how it ends. And you really can't talk about somebody and their impact and their influence, somebody as prolific as Kurt Cobain, without addressing the suicide. So for me, um, you might read a chapter in the book, right? And it might take you, I don't know, half an hour to read the chapter, but it may have taken me, 3 hours on the phone with somebody. A lot of people I spoke to more than once. I try to keep in touch with almost everyone in the book. I made a lot of incredible friends along the way. Um, I think a lot of people rate stuff and then it's like, it's done and dusted and it's in and out the door in a week. But for me, I was thorough with the fact checking process. So that to me was also challenging because it was, getting some of Kurt's friends on the phone, like, okay, we're going to read this together. Like, and then that would kind of go off on its tangent of like more stories. And it was just heavy and a very, very heavy book. I hope everybody in the book knows how much I thank them for being part of this because they helped me honor Walter, and I think I helped them honor.
I honestly, I think this is one of the biggest problems that we have in the society at the moment. The fact that we are not allowed to have opinions anymore, and this is something which is it's something that I don't get it anymore. And if we talk about politics, if we talk about music, if we talk about anything that we talk about, you are not allowed to have your own opinion. You have to feed the narrative, because if you don't feed the narrative, you're suck and you're not cool and you don't get an opinion because you don't have the right. You didn't know him. Yes, everyone owns their opinion. Everyone should be allowed to have an opinion. This is how we got here, by discussing things that we don't agree on.
Exactly. You have to talk about things you're uncomfortable about. You have to challenge opposing viewpoints. Judge.
I think one of the most important things is that we do what we love to, and we
Yeah.
do stuff for us, not for everyone else. And you do
Yeah.
stuff for you that makes you happy. Not you don't try to make anyone else happy. You shouldn't try to make anyone else happy.
I'm
And I
happy
think
with the book. Yeah, I'm happy with it.
that's the most important.
Yeah.
Um, Kelly, I have a question. What was the most interesting thing that you found about Kurt that was not so known or not at all known?
So you see pictures of him all the time, right? And he's got like cats. Like you could tell he was a cat lover. And I love that about him because that to me, the way people treat animals, I think says a lot about a person.
Hmm.
And this is such a small anecdote, but it's something that when I heard this story, it meant a lot to me. So one of the times when Kurt was unhoused, he was living with Greg Hokinson, who was the drummer for his first band, Fecal Matter, which was kind of, the real driving force behind Nirvana. And Greg was wonderful. I liked him a lot. He did pass away recently. He endorsed my book, which I feel privileged that I have that. But his sister Misty did an interview, not in his place, but instead of Greg. She did an interview for the book. And what was cool about Misty doing the interview is that she hasn't been interviewed yet before. And she lived in the house when Kurt lived in the house too. So she's got her own memories and stories. And Misty also loves cats. So one night her brother Greg was out and it was just her and Kurt in the house. And her cat started to bleed and she didn't know what was wrong with the cat. So she went and she got Kurt and he, took a look at the cat and he said, she's pregnant. She's about to have kittens. And he told her what to do. He said, go get a box and get blankets and get a box cutter. And she goes and she gets a box and she gives it to Kurt and she says he cuts an opening for the cat and he stuffs it with blankets. And, the cat has kittens. And she says that, that then Kurt, they kept two of the kittens and Kurt would come in all the time and he would check on the cats and play with the cats. And it's a silly story and it's a little story. And if somebody walking down the street tells you the story, you might not think twice. But when you kind of sit and you go, oh, that's Kurt Cobain you're talking about, it gives you pause because it was such a normal, but also gentle and kind and compassionate gesture that one, I think we forget he was just a human being. And stories like that being told throughout this writing process really helped ground me. And if ever I felt the book was shifting to rock star focus, it brought me right back to no, no, no. This is not a book about Kurt Cobain, the rock star. This is a book about Kurt Cobain who helped somebody deliver their kittens. And just that story normalized him. And then, talking to other people, it was always just these stories that humanized him.
Was that the reason why the book is called Forever in Bloom? Because you wanted to show the positive side of Kurt?
Yes. And I attribute that to my husband. We were kind of like doing a play on words, like what should I call this book? I went through like 1,000 different titles. And I may have been playing like In Bloom on guitar or something. And he goes, it's like, no, that's perfect. He's like, because it's just kind of like, it's a play on words with a Nirvana song. But it really just shows like this man is forever in bloom. And it's such a positive way, I think, of looking at him. You know what I mean? It's just such a positive way of like remembering him and what his music means to so many people. And I don't know, I just thought it was a perfect title. And at one point, my publisher said to me, we're happy with it, but is the title negotiable? Just wondering. And I said, no. I said, because my husband came up with it. I was like, and he is such a part of this. Like him and my child, they're just parts of this book. I've been supported by my family from day one. This was a tough thing to write, you know what I mean? It was, but it's just, I was happy my husband came up with that title.
I think you will change the way in which people are seeing it, and I think that's amazing. And I think it's important that someone is also showing the positive side of him.
Thank you.
How was the writing process impacted you?
It was tough. I mean, like the whole like experience of writing this, it was tough. It was a lot. I mean, I wrote the book and probably rewrote it like more times than I can shake a stick at because, at first I felt like it was disjointed, which it was supposed to feel disjointed. It was just a bunch of standalone chapters with different interviews. And then I was like, no, it really does need to reflect the whole journey. So everything kind of, I added a lot of intros and outros to each chapter to connect them more and to tie them together better. If I was writing something and I was like, I really need somebody from this time and place to help texturize it, that was kind of how I knew who to reach out to and ask questions to. My writing process, I wanted everything to be in like a certain order. So I do have, section 1 focuses on his earlier years in Aberdeen. Then sections, you got the second and third sections would start bringing in people who knew him at different points and parts in his life. You've got a 4th section, which is all these indie artists who were affected by him. And then you have a 5th section, which is just mostly me interviewing other authors. I interviewed Jillian Garr, who has done she's written a ton of stuff, but she's done a lot of Nirvana books. I interviewed Nick Soulsby, again, written a bunch of stuff, but he's well known for his involvement with Kurt Cobain, and Nirvana literature. Mark Yarm, again, he's written, books about grunge or book about grunge. So I tried to really bring in other authors who could, I feel like authors are able to step back and look at things from a more objective standpoint sometimes. So I was able to work with them and be like, okay, so what can you, based on your own time writing about Kurt or Nirvana, like what can you tell me? I brought in another author friend of mine. His name is Darren Paltrowitz. He wrote a book, the DLR book, How David Lee Roth Changed the World. So he was able, and he also has a big podcast and he interviews all these like crazy musicians. And I was like, oh, you need to tell me, like, let's talk about sensationalism in the media. I brought in PR agents. I was like, let's talk about sensationalism in the media. I just tried to be as thorough as possible with my research to make sure that all these different, artistic endeavors that people have, that I had somebody from all these different, factions kind of like speaking about how Kurt affected them. And I talked to people from all over. I have a friend of mine who's a writer, Antonino Tati. He's a writer in Australia. He's brought in, I had one interview last 3 days and 12 hours. That was wild to transcribe. That took a lot. I mean, it was, and then I had Steve Albini's interview, and I talked to him about a month before he passed away. So that was one of his final interviews. Steve Albini was incredible. I was really excited for that interview. He recorded, I'm sorry, he produced, he didn't like to be called a producer, recording engineer, Nirvana's In Utero. So we did speak about his time recording that, which, I know everybody has asked him about his time recording that, but I was able to ask him about Kurt's social conscience, which is what the book really is. Because we know that Kurt wasn't political, but he did have a strong social conscience. So I was able to talk to Steve about that, who Steve himself had a huge social conscience. Awesome person. Some of the money from the book is going to Letters to Santa charity, which Steve's wife founded and runs, and Steve was a big champion of. And what they do is they get these letters to Santa basically from disadvantaged families, and they make their Christmas happen, and they give them $10,000, no strings attached. They're awesome, awesome what they do. So yeah, that was it. It was leave no stone unturned kind of project.
That I see. Based on the time that we spend now discussing, I see that you're a really empathic person. I think that played a huge role in writing this book,
Thank you.
because I think being able to understand the feelings that someone went through is the most important part when you are trying to understand that person. Do you have some parts in the book where you are a bit more critical with Kurt?
No, and I'm afraid that that might be the thing that kind of like some people read it and cock their head, because I understand that I'm very defensive of him in the book, because from what I learned, this is a human being who needs to be defended at this point,
Mm-hmm.
only because so much of what we read about him really panders to the sensationalism. And my thought process was maybe there were times when I should have been more critical, but I'm like, that's already out there. You know what I mean? I look at him as, hey, this was a human being who struggled, and we need to have a sympathetic, lens in which we look. But I came at it from a compassionate lens, and my thought process is, you wouldn't begrudge somebody for breaking an arm or having, diabetes. Why are we begrudging these people for having substance abuse issues? Addiction is a disease, and I'm very sympathetic towards that. And I also don't really care for sensationalism in the media. So to me, I'm very sympathetic towards everything, the Cobains went through.
You went through all this process, Kelly, which I think it's hard, and I think it's hard to start the process, hard to start the research. And I hope there are people who are watching us that are going to say, okay, that was an amazing. I never would think that I would be able to do that ever. What would be your advice there?
Go
How
do
do
it. Go do it. You can. Absolutely, 100%. But no, I'm really introverted, and all these things forced me outside of my comfort zone. Um, but I felt strongly that this was a thing that I should do. I faced a lot of adversity. I had a lot of people telling me you can't do this, and my motto is like, don't tell me what I can and can't do. Um, as a mom, I felt strongly that I needed to make sure I completed this project to show my kid, like, you can do anything you want. You go be on the right. If anybody listening to this is like, I have a story in me, but I don't know if people want to hear it. Like, I promise, there's somebody out there who wants to hear it. Um, Write the book for yourself then. I wrote this for me. At one point, I didn't know, is this going to get a traditional publishing deal? Is this going to be a book that I write and just shelve? And I was okay with knowing that my family might be the only people to read this, and I was fine with that. Just have a good support system around yourself. Have a lot of, like, watch many episodes of The Office to have some humor through the whole thing if you have to. Um, get a lot of candy, eat a lot of candy. It will definitely improve your mood while doing something like this. And just remember that it's art, and don't ever let other people dictate, whether you can or can't produce art. Make your art, make it the best art. So
the most important thing is do it. Like, just like you said, don't let the bastards take you down, because everyone will try to take you down
always.
in one shape of forms. Most important thing is that you should never tell me what I can do or not. And the second thing, which is the most important, there is no competition. That's why I think YouTube is amazing. That's why I think Netflix is amazing. That's why I think the normal TV will die one day, because I think this
Yeah,
competition is not there at the end. And if I want to buy
yeah.
two books about Kurt Cobain or four or five,
Thank
nobody
you.
cares. I want
That,
to read two different perspectives, then I will read two different perspectives, and it is how
that's
it is.
what you just said is spot on. I think people feel that they can only read one book, and it's like, no, it's not like it's $1 million. It's if you want to read multiple books, read multiple books. I mean,
We are
it's
we are anyhow in the moment when you need to make your choices. There are a lot of books written, so you need to make your choices. But if I like this topic and I want to investigate and or to see every possible opinions about that person, then I will do it. And there's no one to tell you if it's right or wrong what you have done, because that's the most important. And Kelly, I think this is spot on with jealousy. This is something that I'm trying to reject as a feeling, to say, okay, that cannot be jealousy from the others. But I feel that most and more, like everyone that is trying to do something, there are a lot of monkeys coming to pick him down and pull him down. Just it's not because they don't like what he's doing or she's doing, but it's just because they are not doing it. You said already that the expectation is not that high for the book. You say, okay, I'm happy that I've written it for me. I'm happy about that. But how would you define the success for the book?
My expectations, and I know I said this before, but my expectation for the book and what would make me happy is one person who's really going through it, one person who's really struggling, reads the book, finds the resources at the end, makes a call that saves a life. And it won't bring Walter back, it won't bring Kurt back, but it saves somebody else's family member. And then my book is more successful than any New York Times best-selling book out there. That's how I feel.
Nice.
Thanks.
I've heard an interview of Mo Gaudat the last days, and he said that the difference between happiness and sadness is expectation. And as soon as you put your expectation extremely high, you will always be disappointed. Always, always, always. And
Always.
I think this is the right way, because at the end, um, it's what everything that comes is a surprise, and it's a positive surprise for you.
Yeah, yeah, 100%.
Um, Kelly, we are close to the finish, to the end of the discussion. I enjoyed it.
Me too.
I
So
think
thank you.
you've done an amazing life telling Kurt story. What do
Oh,
you
thank
think the listeners should take away after our discussion, our conversation?
I would say don't judge a book by its cover. And I know that's hard to do, especially when you've got somebody like Kurt Cobain that you think was in the public eye. And it's like, oh, but everything we need to know about this man must be out there for public consumption. No, I mean, there's a lot out there. But this was a person who had 27 years on this planet and meant a lot of things to a lot of people. But I hope people are able to read this book and see it for what it is. And that is a journey into removing the stigma around mental health, a journey into removing the stigma around suicide. I hope that people can read this book and want to do something good with it, whether it's in Kurt's honor or in Walter's honor or just because it's the right thing to do. I hope people, check out the book and understand that, you had Kurt Cobain, who, for all intents and purposes, was the most famous musician in the world. All eyes were on him, and he struggled and suffered in plain sight. If that can happen to that man, and picture what your neighbor is going through. And I think just take away kindness and empathy from it. Maybe have more respect and appreciation for people who battle being unhoused. Cobain was unhoused. Look at what he did. Look at what he achieved. Have more respect and appreciation, for people who are battling addiction, mental health issues. You know what I mean? Try to be more caring, compassionate, and empathetic, and just understand that we're on this spinning rock together. We need to do better and help each other. You just don't know what somebody's going through, and I think you see so many people with these comments about Kurt Cobain. But he really was happy. Like I learned that a lot from his friends. But he really was this happy guy, and a lot of people really didn't see the suicide coming. So I think it's important to remember that you don't know what somebody has going on. Especially, on like online, people feel so comfortable behind their keyboards to just be trolls and verbally eviscerate strangers. And it's like, why? You don't know what's going to be the breaking point for somebody. Just come into things with kindness and empathy. It's what people deserve. That's it. That's the takeaway of the book. Just be a good person.
Sounds amazing. It's the perfect way that we can finish this.
Thank you.
Kelly, you will have a copy that you have to sign for me
Yes.
whenever you are getting there, because it's already pre-ordered. I would kindly ask you, if you have this in your mind, to make it for the Whereabouts Tales podcast, because I will give it away to our viewers after this episode
Oh,
is
wow.
published.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you a lot for your time. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for having me. This was wonderful.
I hope that people will get to know the Kurt that you wanted to show in the book, and not the ones that are shown, not the one that is shown in all the news papers, which is not the whole story.
I hope so too. Yeah, I hope so too. He was more than just the soundbite and the clickbait. I hope people see that.
I'm happy that someone decided to show that side of the story.
Thank you.
I hope we do this again when you sold the 1 million copy of the book.
From your lips. I hope so too. Look what I did. 1 million copies my mother bought. So,
Yes. And thank you again for your time, Kelly.
me too. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.